never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Fine.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Happy Friday to everybody out there today here on the channel. We're going to be talking some college football head coaching changes. I know I've already talked about it a little bit, but there's a lot of head coaching changes going on because a lot of times one coach leaves one school to go somewhere else, but instead of one coaching change, it ends up being 4 or 5 coaching changes because he'll leave his school and go somewhere else, and then another coach will leave his school to go take his spot at the last school, and it's kind of a domino trickle down effect. And I don't want to get too far behind on this, but we'll have to do at least one more sometime during the off season because there's still, as of right now, 3 or 4 teams who have not announced their new head coach, and there might be some more coaching changes after the bowl season wraps up. But there's already a lot to talk about in the head coaching world, and I don't want to get too far behind, so we'll talk about that. But before I get into that, let me first say that I want to see a lot of you tomorrow night at 244 Livestock Road, East Denali, Georgia. Doors open at 6 o'clock. Bell time will be 7 o'clock for SWA Wrestling, and there will be a special appearance by Santa Claus and the Grinch. And I also want to see some of you Sunday afternoon. Doors open at 4 o'clock. Bell time is 4:30 for UWF Star Clash. SWA tomorrow night. Tickets are $5. UWF Sunday afternoon. Tickets are $10. SWA is 244 Livestock Road, East Denali, Georgia. And UWF is 6687 Highway 72, West Colbert, Georgia. I want to see a lot of you tomorrow night and Sunday afternoon. Everybody should support independent wrestling. It's just as good, if not better, from what you see on TV, and a lot closer and a lot cheaper. But some of the head coaching changes so far, UAB has hired former NFL quarterback Trent Dilfer to be their new head coach. We've already talked about Nebraska hiring Matt Rule. Arizona State hired Kenny Dillingham to be their new head coach. And if you're not sure who Kenny Dillingham is, he has spent the past season as the Oregon Ducks offensive coordinator. Georgia Tech, of course we all know, hired their interim coach, Brent Key, to be their new head coach. And Georgia Tech is hoping he has the keys to them starting to win again, because right now they're not. Colorado, of course, hired Deion Sanders. I talked about that some in yesterday's video. Wisconsin hired Luke Fickell. Charlotte hired Biff Poggi. And no, his real name is not Biff. That is a nickname. I think his name is actually Francis. But he is 63 years old. This is his first college football head coaching job. He spent the majority of his career coaching in high school. He also has worked on Michigan staff here recently under Jim Harbaugh. Auburn, of course, hired Hugh Freeze. South Florida hired Tennessee's offensive coordinator Alex Golesh. Florida Atlantic has hired Tom Herman. So they went from well-known coach Willie Taggart to former well-known coach Tom Herman. We know Tom Herman coached Texas, and most people say he didn't get fired because of the team's productivity on the field. He got fired because he didn't get along with all the higher-ups at Texas as far as the donors and all that. So, of course, since the donors is what gives money to the university, they said Tom Herman's got to go. So Texas was forced to fire him, even though he was doing a pretty good job as the head coach. Cincinnati hired Scott Satterfield. Tulsa has hired Kevin Wilson. Now, Kevin Wilson was the offensive coordinator under Bob Stoops at Oklahoma for many years, but he also was the head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers from 2011 to 2016, and supposedly he was harassing and threatening to beat up players at practice, so Indiana fired him. He's now the new head coach at Tulsa. And Texas State has hired 34-year-old G.J. Kinney to be their new head coach. And that officially makes me feel old because I can remember about 15 or 16 years ago watching him when he was the quarterback at Tulsa. But this past season, he was the head coach of Incarnate Word, who is a 1AA football team. So G.J. Kinney, at 34 years old, is now the new head coach of Texas State. And that name drives me crazy because his full name is Gary Joe Kinney. Why not just be Gary Kinney? I don't understand that. If you're a junior, I get it. Nobody that's a junior is called junior. You're always GJ or EJ or BJ. I get that. But if your full name is Gary Joe Kinney, why not just be Gary Kinney? Western Michigan has hired Louisville offensive coordinator Lance Taylor to be their new head coach. UNLV has hired Barry Odom, and if that name sounds familiar, he was the Arkansas defensive coordinator, but he also used to be the head coach at Missouri. He takes over the reins of the UNLV Running Rebels. And Liberty, as I said in, I think it was yesterday's video, has hired Jamie Chadwell. But I'm just still not sure whether or not it's a step up because he goes from a group of 5 school to a group of 5 school. But I do know as far as pay grade, it's a step up. Jamie Chadwell was making $850,000 a year when he was the coach at Coastal Carolina. Before Hugh Freeze left Liberty to go to Auburn, Hugh Freeze, last contract, he made $5 million at Liberty. But still, you just don't see coaches very often go from a group of 5 school to a group of 5 school. They'll go from a 1AA school to a group of 5 school, or a group of 5 school to a Power 5 school. But to me, Coastal Carolina to Liberty, outside of the money, is about the same job. And then Louisville has hired Purdue head coach Jeff Brom to be their new head coach. So Scott Satterfield leaves Louisville and goes to Cincinnati. Jeff Brom leaves Purdue to go to Louisville. Like I said earlier, it's a trickle-down effect. Now Purdue has to find a new head coach because their coach left. So it's a trickle-down effect. So every time there's a head coach hiring, there usually ends up being 4 or 5 other schools that have an opening because of that one coach leaving. But Jeff Brom was the coach at Purdue, but he also played college football at Louisville. So it's a return home for him. And Louisville needs somebody to actually be all about Louisville because Scott Satterfield wasn't, but Petrino wasn't. And then, of course, they had Rick Pitino in basketball. He wasn't. but they've been on probation in football and basketball, so they need a coach who is actually there to benefit Louisville, to help Louisville. Scott Satterfield done a decent job this year. He was 7-5, but after year one, he threatened to leave and actually interviewed at other schools. And after that, it just seemed like Louisville never wanted him there because they felt like he didn't want to be there, but he was doing so good they couldn't fire him. It's not like he was going 2-10. I mean, he was terrible last year, but outside of that, the other years he's been okay. So even though they didn't feel like he wanted to be there, when you're Louisville and you've been changing ADs, you've been on probation in basketball and football, and you've got a coach who's actually successful, you're stupid to run him off. But if you look at Scott Satterfield's overall record at Louisville and Jeff Brom's overall record at Purdue, Brom was at Purdue longer, but as far as winning percentage and conference record and all that, it's about the same. So I don't know if Louisville will improve, but I definitely don't think they'll get worse. But they need a coach that's all about Louisville, that wants to see Louisville succeed. They haven't had that in basketball or football in quite a while. And a couple of other offensive coordinator news and notes, in case you have not heard. Phil Longo, who has spent the past 4 seasons as the North Carolina offensive coordinator, leaves North Carolina to become the new OC for Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. So Wisconsin's definitely going to change their offensive philosophy. And Arkansas tight ends coach Dowell Loggins is the new offensive coordinator for South Carolina. Supposedly it's not official as of lunchtime yesterday, but that's who they're going to hire. And it just goes to show that South Carolina is not the program they think they are. They think there's some high-profile job that everybody wants. And the fact of the matter is, that's not true. The reason why they hired Will Muschamp to be their head coach years ago was because he was about the 15th coach in line, but the first 14 coaches said, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you. If you're the program you think you are, then all those coaches ain't going to turn you down. The problem is South Carolina thinks that on a scale of 1 to 10, their program is a 10, when the fact is on a scale of 1 to 10, they're at about a 5, 5.5. That's what they are. And just like Will Muschamp, it was the same way with Shane Beamer. Other coaches didn't want it. And now it's the same way with Dowell Loggins. Ever since Monday, there's probably been about 30 or 35 offensive coordinators that supposedly the Gamecocks wanted. And why in the fool would you go out and hire Dowell Loggins if he's about 35th in line? It's because nobody else wanted the job. Now, hopefully for their sake, it works out. But they need to realize they're not the program that they think they are. Kendall Briles would have been an excellent choice. He was on the list. But I don't know if he turned them down or if they knew he was going to turn them down and they said, nah, let's just don't waste our time. But the problem is they're a bunch of idiots. Just like they just lost their former OC, Satterfield. He become the OC for Matt Rule at Nebraska. And they spent 2 years talking about how bad he was and how sorry he was and how he was holding the offense back. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 games of the season, they put up 94 points against Tennessee and Clemson. And then he leaves and they say, oh, we're going to miss him. So all of a sudden, your philosophy changed in 2 weeks' time. And now you've got people who claim that the last 2 games of the season, especially Tennessee game, Satterfield didn't call the plays. It was somebody else that's already on the coaching staff. Now, how much sense does that make? If you've got a OC like Satterfield that spent 2 years having a mediocre offense, and then all of a sudden you score 63 against Tennessee, but he's not calling plays, somebody else is, and then Satterfield leaves, why would you hire Dowell Loggins to be the new play caller? If somebody on your staff can put up 63 points, why wouldn't that person become the new OC. South Carolina just has no idea what they're doing. When they realize on a scale of 1 to 10, they're at about a 5, 5.5, they'll be okay. But they keep getting turned down because they think they're a 10, and they're not. First of all, they've been stuck in mediocrity for 25 years. Second of all, nobody in the history of ever that's been to Columbia, South Carolina wants to live in Columbia, South Carolina. So when they realize they're at about a 5, 5.5 on a scale of 1 to 10, they'll be okay. Any thoughts on any of these head coaching changes? Please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. What do you call a sad strawberry? A blueberry. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.